I'm Charlotte and this is Time Mama Tries to Read, and I'm going to talk to you about a couple of books I've read recently on mental health. Sarah Wilson's First We Make the Beast Beautiful and Johann Hari's Lost Connections, Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. So first of all, I read this one and I did actually do a little bit of a vlog on it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail until I do the comparison. But the premise of this is Sarah Wilson she's quite a sort of TV personality in Australia, I believe. And I think she's reasonably famous here. She does I Quit Sugar cookbooks. And she suffered from quite intense anxiety since she was very, very young. She's unable to do things like sleep without taping up her mouth and doing certain routines, like she has to wash right before bed. She feels like she can hear everything in the whole house. If she's in a hotel, she has to move rooms, and she says it makes relationships almost impossible because how do you explain to somebody that you've got to tape up your mouth before you go to sleep? She goes on quite intensive hikes where she just takes like a fruit and a toothbrush and stuff like that, and she just goes off into nature. So I really enjoyed this book, okay, and I did something which I don't often do, which is as soon as I got to the end, I started at the start and started to go through it again, but I started to make notes. I wished I'd made notes at the beginning, but because I was enjoying it so much, I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to read it as it is, and then I know I'm going to want to read it again because it's so good, so I'm going to go back. But something happened as I got towards the end of the book. I started to get a bit irritated with some of the things that she was saying. And part of that was because some of the solutions that she had to her problems I felt were not applicable to the everyday person, and she was kind of insinuating that they were, sort of. So by the time I went back to the start, I actually was thinking, I actually was struggling to find the bits that I'd loved so much in the first reading, if that makes any sense. So bits where I'd gone, yeah, oh wow, that's just, that just speaks to me. I couldn't actually find them, even though I was reading it, page to page. I think she just got on my nerves a little bit. Also, the layout of it was just completely, I couldn't tell you how it was separated, really. It's not that it wasn't confusing to read. You knew what was going on as you went from one to the other, but very much like a novel, you just kind of madly followed her around as she, I shouldn't use the word mad when I'm talking about a mental health book, I do apologise. But you followed her around in this kind of fairly chaotic way, and what she said made sense, but then I didn't actually feel like there was a conclusion. I know that she thinks we should quit sugar, and I agree with her. I know that she thinks we should go outside more. I know that she thinks that people with anxiety and depression are all looking for this something else, which I kind of agree with. But other than feeling a sense of thankfulness that I'm not alone, I wasn't necessarily feeling that there was a way to make the beast beautiful. And that might not be her fault, it might be my reading of it. Anyway, this is the one I kind of am most, I've got trepidations about talking about this, and I have gone over, when I was lying in bed ill, I went over in my head about 1,000 times how I was going to talk in this video. So this book is about lost connections, and it doesn't actually say on the back the kind of overriding impetus for the book. And I know I can see why they've left it out, but the reason why I'd like to warn you about the overriding impetus is because, well, I'll just have to say what it is. Basically, the first part of the book is Johann Hari going to scientists, reading, fair dues to him, tons of research, relating it to you, giving you all the references in the back, and the basic conclusion is that antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds that are SSRI meds, so they're basically meds that make the serotonin increase, I believe, they do not work. If they do work at all, it is barely at all, and for very few people, like I think less than 1%. Yeah. If you are on an SSRI medication, that is a massive kick in the guts. And if you are not on an SSRI medication, but you're the sort of person who, for whatever reason, doesn't like the idea of an antidepressant, I feel it gives a weapon to attack the people that actually feel that those drugs are working for them. So I kind of felt like there should be a warning about that. I'm not on an SSRI at the minute, but I was last year. And I was at my wit's end. I went to the doctors and I basically said, before I went in, I said to my husband, if he doesn't give me an anti-anxiety pill, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I just felt like it was my last resort. And if he had said to me, well, actually, statistically, they don't work, I think I would have just had a nervous breakdown. When he gave me the pills, I was so happy and so relieved that I'd found a solution. And they did feel like they worked initially. The reason I personally stopped taking them was because about, I think it was 6 months in, I had a very, very, very low, like fortnight, which I would say as close as I've been to depression in years. I've been riddled with anxiety, but have not actually been depressed. And it was horrendous. I didn't know what to do. And so the only thing I could think to do in that sort of moment was to come off the pills I was taking in order to at least know what I was feeling. Sorry. I'm going to have to drink some cold coffee now to ease my throat. So, I don't know how I would have felt if I had read that, excuse me, during that time when I felt like they were a solution. And I know from personal experience now, and also just from knowing a lot of friends that are on similar medication, that the judgment about going on that medication is massive, and it is way more than the judgment you get for actually having a mental health condition. It is so weird. I don't know what the problem is. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Why do people get so upset when you say you're going on medication? I literally saw it from I knew it was going to happen and I braced myself for it happening. But I had, loved ones saying to me, oh, I really don't want you to go on them. I had friends going completely silent about it, not asking me how I was doing with them, just completely avoiding the topic. Friends who would normally talk to me about lots of things. I had people almost within the same conversation, sort of online conversation about me making this decision, sending me links to herbal remedies. So not overtly saying they didn't agree, but like, okay, yeah, you're going on that. But, oh, by the way, I've taken this and I found it really helped. And it was always from people who didn't actually have anxiety. Everybody experiences some anxiety. But there's obviously a difference between experiencing it as part of being, an everyday human being and really feeling like you can't cope with life. And so the judgment I felt from that was kind of twofold. One, the judgment of going on the pills, and two, the judgment of, obviously, we don't actually really think that you're that ill. I genuinely feel that was where some of it was coming from. So, I don't know why people reacted like that. I mean, some people even said, literally out loud said to me, I don't think you'll find the answer at the bottom of a bottle of pills. Super helpful, super helpful. So I feel like this book should be handled with caution. That half the reason why I feel like that is because the science is compelling. Okay, so he kind of says that any positive effects from an antidepressant and anti-anxiety meds are commonly just a placebo. And actually the way he describes, he's coming from the position of somebody who has been on medication since he was 18, has blogged and written extensively in big newspapers, I think the New York Times he writes for, defending antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds in just the way I have just done there. Writing articles about why there shouldn't be a stigma, why they're a miracle, why they give life back to people, why it's not our fault we've got an imbalance in the brain, etc., etc. So he's coming from that position. He presents all this science that discredits everything he's ever believed, and he does it with genuine sorrow, and that is why it's so compelling, because you're like, shit. I think he's right. That's the conclusion I've come to, is that he probably, I feel like undoubtedly he is right, that they don't seem to do anything, and that they have these really real side effects, and good God, I can speak for the side effects. So I just felt massively convicted in my own self. I thoroughly encourage you to read it, but just be prepared for this massive bubble to burst if you feel like anti-anxiety meds are working for you. I kind of don't want to disrupt that, because in the same way they worked for me for that very brief 6 months, I wouldn't have wanted anyone to come and just like wreck it all, which is kind of what he does. However, If you're at the end of that 6 months that I was at, where you're starting to feel not quite yourself, that you might want a higher dose, or that you're having a full-on breakdown, and he says it's within 6 months to a year that he would feel like that, it might be a good time for you to pick up this book, because he does actually offer very real solutions, very doable solutions to what he terms as being the real cause behind depression and anxiety. So he separates it into disconnections, and the disconnections are from meaningful work, from other people, from meaningful values, from childhood trauma, from status and respect, from the natural world, from hope or a secure future, and then causes 8 and 9 are the real roles of genes and brain changes. So he acknowledges the biology behind some depression and anxiety. But what he also, his main aim is to say that the world we are living in, which, you know, it's kind of said in lots of books, including this one, the world we are living in is to blame for how we feel. And I kind of like that. It takes the responsibility away from me somewhat. But then he puts the ball back in your court to actually make the changes. So, and he also acknowledges to a certain extent that he was in a position to make these changes in a much easier way than you or I. So he says he had the time of a journalist, he had the freedom, he could travel the world, etc., etc. Unlike Sarah Wilson, he kind of acknowledges that he's in a position of privilege, but he does try and say, even if you just do one of these things, and his main thing is meditation, which is also the main thing in this. And sorry, meditation is something that I've avoided like the plague for exactly the same reasons he's avoided it, and for exactly the same reasons Sarah Wilson has avoided it, because we just don't think that it will work for us. And he just basically begs you to try. And I kind of feel like now the time has come where I've got to take that seriously. And I am going to try and do some meditation. I think I'm going to have to start today in order for it to actually be an intention I'm going to carry out. 15 minutes a day. And he gives you lots of visualization techniques. Yeah, there's loads more. So it's hard for me to sort of sum up what he says with that. I mean, I just think you need to read it if you think you're in that space, and you need to avoid it if you don't. And what I would urge anybody who does read this, please, for the love of God, tread carefully when you're telling. I've done this on a video, which is why I'm so scared that people who are in a vulnerable position will have watched too much of it and already started to have a nagging doubt. Yeah, I just don't know. I might even put another, if I put a proviso, it's just going to give away what is going to happen in the book. So yeah, I don't know what more I can do really. But I would hate for this to fall into the wrong hands. I would hate for somebody who literally doesn't know a thing about science and has no personal experience of anxiety, and I mean like even parents and loved ones, to read this and then to just go, aha, this is why you shouldn't be doing this thing. Because I think ultimately what I've kind of come to the conclusion of is that the stigma of going on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication isn't about that. I mean, it can't be, can it? You wouldn't have diabetes and then have somebody say to you, ooh, wouldn't use insulin. You just wouldn't have it in any other situation. So I still firmly believe that the response is actually to the reality that that person has a mental health condition. They must have, because they've gone to the doctors. They've been actually medicated. So I still truly believe that the stigma is around mental health issues themselves and not around the medication. But the medication just jars people into realising that, oh, going to yoga isn't actually helping you. It's more than... when I went to yoga, it really helped. I've got words to say to people like that, but they'd be rude. I think it just makes people think, oh, you're not just having the odd bad day, And I think that is where the stigma comes from. So those types of people, and it could be you or I, because I genuinely think I would have felt like that in my early 20s when I was a bit cockier and didn't really... I had symptoms of anxiety back then, but I was dealing with them in a really different way. And I would have been absolutely anti-anxiety meds. And I hate myself for thinking that, but I know that's what I would have been like. And I would have probably read something like this and been very, very... I would have been like a bull in a china shop with it. And that makes me very sad to think I would have been like that. But I'm pretty much sure I would have been. So yeah, I encourage people to read this. I do kind of feel it is essential. People have said that it's radical, that it will change your life. It's a game changer. It will make, Naomi Klein says, the more people that read this book, the better off the world will be, which is why I bought it, because I love her. So yes, those are my books, and I hope that I haven't said anything that's hurt people or made people uncomfortable with their choices. But I felt I had to review them because they really did actually throw up a lot of stuff for me. This was a good book. I would definitely read this if you want to just feel like there's somebody who's a bit like you. But for me, the game changer was Lost Connections. And if I feel that there is a gateway to recommend that to anybody I know, I will recommend it, but with that warning. Okay. I hope you're all doing well, and that if you do have mental health problems, that you're not having such a bad day today. And that if you are having a bad time, you can always put a little message in the comment below. I have chatted a couple of times now about anxiety, and I'm more than happy to listen. And if you're on Instagram, you can always send me a private message if you don't want everybody to see it. Okay, I will see you soon. Bye.